بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وأسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Our beloved Imam, teacher and leader Sheikh Suhaib Webb is a contemporary American activist and speaker who converted to Islam, as he likes to say, during the DOS effects period, when we all converted to Islam, or many of us converted to Islam in the late 1990s. After a career as a DJ, and then became very early on after his conversion a student of Islam's sacred sciences, memorized the Book of Allah, which I think in and of itself speaks volumes, that he memorized the entire Quran. After his studies here in the States, he departed in 2004 with his family to Cairo, where he studied at the prestigious University Al-Azhar, where he completed a degree there, and he also participated in the Dar al-Ifta department, where he was a translator, and he's someone who I think really needs no introduction, and I say that with absolutely no pretense. I want to welcome everybody. After welcoming Imam Suhaib to this space, I'm very, very grateful to be here. As I was discussing with Imam Suhaib what we would talk about tonight, the topic of redefinition came up. And I think that because we live in an age of tremendous, tremendous change, and with change, there's going to come redefinition of certain norms. And so as our days go, and as the clock ticks, and as we get a day older each day, if we don't better ourselves, we've been cheated out of a day. We've been cheated out of an opportunity to become better people. And this is consistent with the verse in the Quran that many of us know, and we hear oft mentioned when we're talking about change, and when we're talking about societal change, when God tells us, indeed, Allah will not change a condition of a people until they change that which is in themselves. The people in this room, if the people in this room took serious the responsibility of being upright people, that's going to have an impact on the rest of the community. And that's by extension going to have an impact on the rest of society. So in this process of changing ourselves, we have to ask a really, really important question. Is Islam reconcilable with the reality that we live in, or is it not? In other words, does it really work for us in the time and place that we live? Is it actually something that we can reconcile with our lived experience and with the life that we live? Or is it something that existed in a previous time that's not really relevant to us? And so that's a very, very brief preamble introducing our beloved Imam Suhaib, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
So the topic is change, and I'm not going to say a lot because it's a discussion, as I understood it. So does Islam allow this breadth of change? And is Islam equipped with the instruments that are going to allow you to be a Muslim in America? And then how do we define what that is? Because I will argue, and I think you will probably agree with me, I think we've inverted it. That the people that have been given the keys to the Rolls Royce shouldn't be driving the car. And ta'leef is not weird, ta'leef is normal. But now if we look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we are taught this concept of change, this concept of what we call tajdeed. And this is mentioned in the hadith of our master Ibn Majah, rahimahullah ta'ala, who said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the hadith of Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu, that the Prophet said that every 100 years Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send someone, yujaddid laha deenaha, who will reform the religion for the Muslims. Now, there's a difference between tabdeed and tajdeed. Tabdeed means to destroy. Tajdeed means to remodel. When you remodel a house, you don't destroy the foundation. You just look and see what are some things that people have neglected. That's tajdeed. Tabdeed would to be destroyed the whole house. And I think that's where sometimes people get confused. Oh, ta'leef wants to reform Islam. Suhaib Webb is trying to reform Islam. Yeah, alhamdulillah, we hope we could be reformers of Islam. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we talk about change. He equipped us cognitively to understand that there are certain parts of the religion that are going to change. And will change until the end of time. And those are those aspects where either the text is not definitive, like established prayer. No one can come and say, yo, I think established prayer means like sell popsicles. It's established prayer, dude. Right. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he says in the Quran, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Live with them in a nice way. How do you define a nice way? Nobody can come and say, buy Twinkies or, rent a movie, eat, sleep, love. Nobody can say that. It's left open. It's left open, right? Now, watch this. The majority of text in the Quran and Sunnah, do you think they're restrictive and definitive or open and transcendent? 95% of them are open and transcendent. Who said that? This white convert, liberal dude, they go to Egypt and you know what happened to them. They in Egypt. They go to Egypt, they drink from the Nile and stuff starts happening. Sheikh bin Bayya told us that. Sheikh Muhammad al-Hassan from Mauritania, from Shinqit, he memorized the Sitta. The Sitta. Forget like 40 hadith. He's like, I was 3 when I did that joint. Like, I memorized the Sitta. He told me to my face, 97% of the texts are open. Yeah, 3% are fixed. But why are we not empowered as a community to change? And I think there's a few reasons why. Number one, we're scared. Shawqi said, لا تخشى عظيما فالذي في الغيب أعظم. He said in his poem, Ahmed Shawqi is an Egyptian rapper. He said in his mixtape, don't fear something incredible, because what you don't see is probably more dangerous. I mean, what you see something, you run from it, what you're running to might be more dangerous than what you should have taken head on. And he actually was talking about an ant that found itself on the Muqattam. If you know what's the Muqattam, they're small hills, like the hills here in Milpitas, right? These small hills. So his poem is beautiful. He talks about this ant, and she realizes, I'm up on a hill, yo, and I'm an ant. Ants don't go on hills. So then she starts booking, right? She slips and falls in a puddle and drowns. And before she drowned, she said, لا تخشى عظيما فالذي في الغيب أعظم. And then as she was drowning, she said, never fear the great thing in front of you, because what you don't see could be even more dangerous. So I think we're frightened to participate, to take charge. But I'm going to tell you, if you don't accept that change, the Islam of my children in America is going to be in doubt. Because my daughter put Usher on my phone as a joke. I was sitting with some brothers and suddenly, dun, 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 dun. And I said, wallahi, this ain't my ringtone. And it was like, wave your hands in the air and DJ got us falling in love or something else, the whole track. And I went home and she started laughing. She said, your phone rang, didn't it? My daughter doesn't even know who he is. She just was playing with my phone and did it, right? I hope, well, maybe she does, and she put Justin Bieber on my Facebook wall. It's a long story. But do you think my daughter is going to relate to you, who understand the reality of the situation, or someone who doesn't? So the viability, the health of Islam in America is really going to develop, I would say, and become a safe haven for people like my daughter and converts if the younger generations who are already culturally equipped grab the mic. But if you don't grab the mic and you aren't trying to grab the mic, don't complain. But I said that 97% of the texts are left open. So then the question comes, then what defines them? How do scholars, I'm not telling you to go home and like, oh, guess what? Okay, cool. Word is born. That's nice. Awesome. No, there's a system that we study. I studied it for 10 years. And even after 10 years, the sheikh was like, no, you ain't ready. I was like, come on, man. I ain't David Carradine and I'm not Grasshopper, man. I got to go back, right? He said, no. But what do you think helps them define those type of texts? Number one is culture. Culture helps define a text that's not definable. Either it's mujmal or am. It could restrict it. And if you go through the books of fiqh, you'll find that every act of worship, that custom comes into play. Even in wudu. How do we know the muwala in wudu? If somebody has waited too long And they started washing their hands and the phone rang and they went, "Oh, what's up? What's happening? What's cracking? You going to Ta'leef? I'm going to." Right? What does Imam Dasuqi, who's a mujtahid in the Maliki madhab, say is the defining factor to know if you took too long for the wudu? And he said that's based on the weather where you live, the custom of where you are. In salah, the concept of niyyah. The Shafis, you're a little bit stricter than we are in that joint. Because you say it, we say it. We say it if a person has an LD issue. Yeah, because that's their reality. Maybe they forget a lot. Is that not taking into consideration a person? What about Fatiha? Fatiha is a pillar of Salah. But what about the new Muslim? You find that the Malikis is funny, man. The Malikis like, there's no way that anyone can do that. It's not allowed. You got to read in Arabic. And then at the very bottom, Dasuki says, well, actually, there's no problem with it. Because they don't know how to read Arabic yet. So it takes into consideration. Every pillar from the 5 pillars of Islam, you'll find people are taken into consideration because the Prophet taught us that the custom, the people, the emergency situations, all of those are taken into consideration to help define that 97%. And that's why I get upset when people say, you want to make an American Islam. I'm making American Islam. I'm trying to make Islam. How many of you here, your iman was saved because of this place? Don't raise your hand. But one is enough. One is enough, And if no one raised their hand, we got to keep going. Right? Why? Because it spoke reality. It allowed you to read religion within the backdrop of you as an American citizen. And it tries, and correct me if I'm wrong, and it tries to let you know that there's really no contradiction with the two. Because we have an axiom in Sharia that says, Salih li kulli zaman wal makan. That Sharia is good for every place and every time and every situation. How can we say that the Prophet is a mercy to everything that exists, and we say that Islam can't work in America? If jinn became Muslim, if a tree stump cried because the Prophet left it, you telling me the eyes of the Americans can't cry because Muhammad is gone? And Ibn Sirin used to relate that hadith, and he used to cry and say, woe to us, our hearts are harder than trees. We stay away from hadith and we don't cry. But this tree that the Prophet left only for a few days shed tears because it missed the Prophet. And you're going to tell me Islam is not for America? I know here you're seeing people become Muslim every week. And today I did this TV show, Make Dua, I might be on this reality joint. Yeah. For real, it's a reality TV show. It's called like Desperate Imams or something like that. Desperate Imams. The lady asked me, she's like, can you think of someone that describes how you are? I was like, Morpheus. She was like, are you like really an imam? Like, God, like, man, I didn't know, like, you guys were like American and like us and stuff. You know, it was like mind on the ground, you know? And then I told her, I said, well, actually, it's a lot of us out here like this, man. But we don't have a critical mass. Not yet. And that change hasn't occurred at the institutional level, right, for us to really bring it yet. People don't know, we only get started, right? Inshallah. So when we talk about change, number one, I would say most importantly, you can't simply complain about the communities if you're not trying to change your communities in a respectful way. Smart, disciplined, intelligent, nuanced, respectful, but unwavering in your commitment to speak to the people in this country. Because if we live Islam for the East and the West, we're criminals. And if we live Islam for the past instead of for now, yeah, we're negligent. And the Prophet said that whoever Allah intends for is the one who understands. The ulama said understands means understands the deen and understands the hood. My daughter don't pray behind no wall out. I said, do you like praying behind the wall? I said, how do you feel? She said, I don't feel right. I feel like something's wrong. Now we're going to raise young women up like this, man. Young women in this country, who are Muslim, can go and hug Cornel West, shake hands with Chomsky, but they can't even see the imam in the masjid. And we expect them to be psychologically in tune or committed to a community that wasn't in tune with their own emotional states. Now we want to talk about change. How did the wall get there? The wall got there because something went down in the 4th century and the ulama said, we got to put up a wall. Now, we have an axiom in Islamic law that says, if the cause is gone, the ruling is gone. And that's why, as I finish, Al-Qarafi said, clinging to classical books without taking into consideration the malat, I don't know how you translate that, like the outcomes of what you're saying to people, is dallun mudil. Is leading people astray. Because that logical feeling that you find in yourself is right usually. And I'll be honest with you. And couple that with interacting with scholars, imams, imamats, who vibe with you. And utilize them. And don't be shy to question them. And don't be shy to say, you know what, Suhaib, I don't know about that. And someone says, ooh, you don't have adab. No, that's the height of adab. That's right. So I want to encourage you to go at it, engage, learn, study, question. But don't just learn the tradition. Dr. Jackson said this, and it's true, man. The tradition is not the goal. You know what Imam Walid Muhammad said, rahimahullah? He said people who study the classical normative Islam, making that their goal, are like people who bought a map. But people who went beyond that are like people who own a compass. And he said something, and I'll leave this with you. He was asked by a sister once, she came to him and said, I studied Arabic to make dawah. He said, no. You study Arabic in America for yourself. Study Spanish if you want to make dawah. That fahm, that creativity, that vision that Islam gives people is something you have to bring back into our communities, man. And you have to give, especially the generations that's coming after you, my kids and your kids. You are the ones who are going to be their Osama Cannon. Believe it or not. They're Hamza Yusufs. They're Ingrid Madisons. They're Dalia Mugahids. You're the one that's going to help me with my daughter. My daughter don't memorize Quran with me. I tried, man. She's like, that's Baba, man. When I go home, I'm not Imam. I'm Baba and honey. Right? But when I brought a 23-year-old Malaysian sister, right, who got the little kind of cool, you know what I mean, hijab and everything, styling, my daughter's like, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So don't understand, and I finished saying this, that ta'leef is only for you. But you have to make it for others. And you have to be unwavering. Respectful, but unwavering. May Allah give you tawfiq.
Alhamdulillah. So we're going to open the floor. Questions, comments, observations. You have been empowered. You no longer have an excuse. Be open. Yes, ma'am.
So I feel like having a religion sometimes is, well, I mean, everybody wants to be free, as in try to do what makes sense to them, but then I realized if I don't have a religion, then I can't, I'm sort of not quite free, because, I mean, all that advertisement, all the media is shaping my religion, even though I think I'm free and I can be for myself, I'm not. But then when I want to be religious, when I try to be religious, then as you stare at all these people like, oh, well, you shouldn't like laugh in public, or you shouldn't like, this is not really Islam, that's not really Islam. I understand, it's probably more, but I'm saying like I have this, okay, so if I'm gonna try to read the text and tafsir as I want then how is it different than not having a religion at all? Because I'm only translating religion in my own way, and it might not be too different from what I had before. But then if I take it as it is, it tends to be too, it's very, it has so much boundary, you know? And I feel like if you're a little weird, you're not going to fit into that. Like if you want to climb trees, you can't be a Muslim. Like, and I want to have religion. I want to have boundaries. Because it saves me from being, like, from following all these advertisement outlets and media, whatever they tell me is freedom. I follow them if I don't have religion. But then I don't want it to be too strict, so where's the balance?
Thank you, sis, for asking a question so many of us are asking, maybe not verbally, but with our state. Yeah, you know, as Imam Suhaib was talking, I was thinking about the fact that if you learn Islam and you take Islam and understand Islam from qualified people who understand it and who understand your realities he was alluding to, there's not really going to be as much of a problem as there is for many of us who've taken Islam from people who don't perhaps understand it correctly or understand us correctly. Because I think someone listening to what our beloved Imam has said, someone could easily say, well, it sounds like there's a call to something new here, or kind of like an independent thought, or like a kind of, I'm going to do my own thing, or I don't really have to ask the scholars. And that's not what he's saying at all. And that's not what I get from it. But what he's saying is that people have to, number one, admit to themselves and take ownership of the fact that we all as individuals have a responsibility to understand for ourselves, because at the end of the day, we're going to be answerable only for ourselves. And we can't continue to blame other people, right? And so there has to be this sense of like, and that's really the thing, is like if you ask this question about change, the world is changing, ideas are changing, conversations are changing, but are we changing? Or are we pleased to just be the same old us that we were 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, right? And so when I'm getting ready to want to go climb the tree, or laugh in public, or do perfectly normal things, if someone's really challenging that, then I have to go talk to qualified scholars that are going to explain to me, is it permissible for me to climb a tree, or is it permissible for me to laugh in public? But when you have, unfortunately, still situations, there was someone who went locally here to a Muslim center and mentioned their name, which was a historically Muslim name, and the person said, your name is garbage, it doesn't mean anything, you should throw it away. This is a leader of a community, right? Supposedly. That's how severe it really is, you know. And I think a lot of what you're hearing from our beloved Imam comes from having been on the front line and seen so many of these realities and seen so much of what people are talking about. But a simple answer, I would say, is just climb that tree. Climb the tree. You know, people can't climb trees. Well, how bad has it really gotten? You know. So,
can I drop something? Yeah, please. First of all, may Allah reward you for your asking that question. Obviously, it's really dear to you. You're shedding tears about it. What I like about the audience here, you guys don't laugh at people. I know that sometimes you give talks like people laugh at people. You should never laugh at people. But someone told you you can't smile in public. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in a sound hadith, which is related with 13 different chains by one of our scholars from his student. There's a spider here. And that's not what the hadith says. There's actually a spider. He said that one of the ways to enter paradise is to bring happiness to other people. Idkhalu surur. The Prophet said this. Also, the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to smile. And the hadith where he encouraged us to smile is not only for men. It's an unrestricted hadith. It's am. It's am. Now, this goes back to what I talked about earlier, the concept of how in certain aspects of Islam there are cultural constructs that play a part. And that's a good example. Maybe in certain cultures, women don't smile. Maybe in certain cultures, women don't wear black around their face, like Oklahoma. I'm not saying this to disrespect anyone who wears niqab, but in Oklahoma, this is associated with the robbers, like bandits. My mother, she was like, man, is everything all right? I said, no, it's one of the Muslim sisters. Oh, okay. My mother's from the country. She was like, what's up with that, right? So I think one thing that Sheikh Osama said is very important for you is to climb the tree, and then I would take the following weapons with you metaphorically. Number one, anyone that's going to succeed religiously in America needs a few things. Cognition, study. You need to engage. And this is not study, don't get me wrong. Coming to an event where you have like an hour talk or 2 hour talk is great. But finding people like Sheikh Osama, like Sheikh Ubaidullah, Sister Muslima Pramil, for example, and engaging with a relationship with them and throwing these questions at them and listen to how they answer because they understand, as you said, your culture reality. Number two, fraternity. We have to have brother and sisterhood. We can't survive without each other. I'm sure right now when you stood up and said what you said or shed the tears that you shed, I bet there's someone in this room who said, I went through the same thing. Anyone here went through it? And I bet there's like, afterwards, I'm going to talk to her. Because the Prophet said we support and strengthen each other. Number three are healthy places to worship. We have to have healthy houses of worship. And what I mean by healthy are open to everyone. Islam, sister, did not ask us to be perfect. Islam did not ask us to achieve perfection. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ said, Saddidu wa qaribu. And another narration, he used the word which means to shoot an arrow at a target. Because how many of us, if we shoot an arrow from here and the target's on that wall, we're going to hit the center of the target? So the ulama said, the Prophet said that as if to say it's not hitting the center of the target that's perfection, but the fact that you shot the arrow, the fact that you made effort is perfection in itself. So cognition, someone around you that you can engage and study. Fraternity like this, and that's why I think these are crucial, right? And third, a healthy place to worship. I think are things that will help climb that tree out.
Thank you, sir.
We talked about how a lot of our faith is defined by the culture in which we're encompassed by. And a lot of the time, the culture in which we are embedded in is influenced by the society in which we're in. And the society is constantly changing, and therefore its influence on culture means that culture is, however small, constantly changing. And if we're saying that 95% of a lot of the writings in the Quran are open-ended and influenced by culture, then it means that however small, those interpretations are constantly changing as well. So then with that said, where do you as a Muslim growing up in America or an American Muslim look for guidance? Are we looking at scholars who we feel are culturally relevant? However, they are only focusing on a certain time as well. So if everything is constantly moving, then the only thing you can rely on is your own conscious analysis of what makes sense to you. As Brother Osama said, you need to understand what you are bringing into your life, because at the end of the day, you are only responsible for yourself. So then how do you understand that you are not creating your own religion or feel guilty of that blasphemy, right? Because at times when you're just trying to say, okay, do I understand this or do I understand that? Whatever I understand is what I accept. At times you feel like you are creating your own religion, and it brings upon yourself a certain guilt. So.
I feel like, thank you for your question. I feel like there's almost a either or in your presentation. Either we consult scholars that are they themselves attempting to reconcile it all, or we do it by ourselves. And I don't think that it's an either or. I think that there's two things. One, you do have to take onus yourself. And you have to admit, that other folks are going to do it for you. But the real brilliant thing is that, and this is the question I was really asking, this concept of renewal and reform. Do you really think it looks like renewal and reform while it's happening, or it's only really appreciated as that in hindsight? When you can look back at a previous context where Muslims had to engage the society they were in critically and to take a stance in that society, while it was happening, it was probably pretty violent, right? Figuratively speaking, that it wasn't just like this easy, smooth process. So the real wisdom is that Allah, in His generosity, has always brought people out of the society that understood His book, understood the example of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in that context. I mean, do we really think that like Muslims, when they got established in China, that they sent for an imam from Morocco? There was Chinese Muslims that developed Chinese scholarship and then became leaders of their community. So I think when he said that those scholars themselves are attempting to understand, that's the whole point. They have to be in each place. There has to be people in each place. But why have we kind of created this almost like there's a superhero group somewhere sitting waiting to save you, when in reality each and every one of us has the potential to become a scholar, male or female, right? And I don't mean overnight. I don't mean that like, you just get to open up the book and then ta-da, that's all that, no. It's a process you have to learn. But absolutely, I think honestly, and this is part of what I hear Imam Suhaib saying, we haven't taken onus. We're apathetic. We don't really care. We're not really doing anything. We're waiting for someone else to do it for us.
I think something else is not everything needs
listen up, y'all. Listen up.
Not everything needs a fatwa. And that's actually mentioned in the books of Usul. Al-Banani, in his Hashiyah on the Jawami' of a Subki, he talks about how everything don't need a fatwa. We became like constantly looking fatwa for everything. Everything doesn't need a fatwa. The Prophet said, istafti qalbak. The Prophet said, ask yourself sometimes. But there are two things that need to be addressed in this important question. Number one is, what is an obligation upon the non-scholar? And I don't have time to define what's a scholar. That's a class, right? We become Facebook. Everything in 160 characters, man. That's not how life works. Instant oatmeal ain't that good. What's an obligation upon you is to ask. Things that you don't know in anything, but now we're talking about Islam, is to ask someone who knows. How did the scholars traditionally normatively define, sister, someone who knows? By two things: knowledge of the religion and knowledge of the people that they lived with. Now, at that moment in time, what's an obligation upon you is to accept an answer that fits that moment. Or to look for an answer. What's the obligation of that scholar at that moment, even within changing norms and so on and so forth, is to strive his best to, or her best to answer you at that moment, and that's what Allah has asked you to do. Allah has not asked us to go beyond that. That's impossible. And now that's what we call a taklifu bil muhali la yajuz. We have this axiom that says asking people to do something which is beyond their ability is not allowed. Now, what's really interesting is that dispensation, are you with me, sister? Dispensation is built into the system, back there, that allows for that answer to change in the future and would not make you wrong for following the answer before. Because the system, as a religion, allows that change. And that's why Imam al-Zuhri, rahimahullah, the Sheikh of Imam Malik, Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, when he would come to Medina from Damascus, Khatib al-Baghdadi mentions this in his book, Adabu al-Mufti, the qualities of a mufti. He said he used to go during Eid, and he wasn't Zuhri anymore, He'd put on a starter jacket, it was the early 90s, some Dickies, milkshakes, and he would go and hang out, and it says he would hang out with the women, and he would ask them, what's up, what's going on in your life? And he'd have like this, with sisters. And he talked to them about phenomena, what's popular, what's hitting, what's going on, what are the things that are happening. Then he would go to the older men, he would hang out with them and talk with them. And then he would go with the youth, and he would spend his vacation in Medina actually trying to reacquaint himself with the phenomena, the dashboard of popular culture, if you will, in 2nd century Islam. Right? And then he would go serve as a mufti. So the scholar, his obligation is to be familiar with culture as best he can, in certain areas, not in everything. If you ask a scholar, about Tawheed, he doesn't have to say, well, I have to know the culture. Tawheed is Tawheed, right? And to be grounded in his or her religion. Now, what's an obligation upon the person that's asking is to feel comfortable, not to take the answer. We say, Al-Qarafi said, Al-Fatwa ghayru yulzam, which means the fatwa is not binding on you. You ask somebody, you don't like the answer, that's not a problem. Don't feel like, well, if I don't like the answer, maybe I'm changing the deen. You ain't that important. No, I'm being serious, right? Secondly, Allah has not asked you to go beyond that. You are burdening yourself, and that's why they used to say, foolish is the person who burdens himself with what Allah has not burdened him with. Right? Now, in this age of deconstructionism, people, because they are insecure religiously, what we find is the propensity for them to think that the strictest opinion is always the best. And Sufyan al-Thawri said that making things hard and difficult is the job of the foolish. Making things easy and palatable is the job of the faqih, is the job of the scholar. And Allah says, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمْ عُسْرٍ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمْ يُسْرٍ. Allah wants ease for you. Allah doesn't want hardship for you. When I say ease, I don't mean to do haram and to turn our back on the deen, but within the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, is that ease, inshallah.
Ms. Suja?
In regards to like Islam, like a lot of people are so open-ended, right, with parameters. I think she was trying to say, well, how do we know, what to decide, like, for a situation like laughing is wrong. Like other things, like for myself, even, like in regards to music, like there's different opinions as far as like music and if it's Quran, if it's not, like dividers, for example, all these things have different opinions. So personally, like what I find myself a lot of times is just say, okay, I'm gonna go with the safer choice. Like, okay, like if someone says don't listen to music, someone says, okay, Sam Yosef is okay. Okay, I'm just gonna go with don't listen to music because I mean it's a safer opinion. It's more conservative. So is that approach like always going with the more conservative? I mean, safe opinion. Like, would that something that you consider work or?
That's the question for Imam Suhaib, but I'll say two things. One, if we as a community just figured out and adopted this point that I'm about to make, that if you're going to be rigid, if you're going to take a safer opinion, that's for you. But that doesn't mean that you have to force that on everybody else, right? Because there is a great wisdom in taking a safer opinion. The Prophet said, things that are permissible are clear, things that are not permissible are clear. In between them are doubtful things, ambiguous things, right? So whoever avoids ambiguous things has guarded their deen and guarded their dignity, guarded their religion and guarded their dignity. So taking a safer opinion for oneself, I mean, no one's saying like always take the easy route, right? And you bring up the question of music, there's a lot of music that's problematic that you shouldn't be listening to. So someone saying there's a difference of opinion about music doesn't mean that you can just listen to whatever you want to listen to, right? But the most important thing, and I'll close with this, is nurturing a sense of like real personal devotion to Allah so that that conversation about ask yourself is a healthy conversation. To where it's not about trying to find the easy route, it's about trying to find the thing that's going to draw you nearer to your Creator. Because if you don't have that, all these conversations are pointless. If it's not about what's going to draw me nearer to Allah, right? I don't know if that answers your question. If Imam Suhaib, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think a few points here. Like, let me give you an example of that, and why sometimes that's problematic. But Imam Shatibi said that those type of personal decisions will always happen, like what the brother decided, right? So when I became Muslim, my parents are still not Muslim, right? May Allah guide them to Islam and all of our parents to Islam and our families. And my mother doesn't buy zabiha meat, but in Oklahoma, anyone here from the South, like Oklahoma, Midwest, you know food is like life, right? And when they cook steaks, it's like as big as that table, man. It's like, pow, one steak, your steak. And they got baked potatoes like pumpkins. So my mom, I became Muslim. I came back and they were telling me you can't eat chatka. Chatka is like non-zabiha meat. And my mother was like, it's great to have you back. I cooked steak for you. Now it wasn't no for me. I knew what I was going to do. That is grab the A1. Now I have two opinions here. Eat or not to eat? That is the question. If I went to my mother and said, Astaghfirullah, this is the meat of the kuffar, and in the Maliki madhab, I can't even use your utensils, right? And is that real silver? Right? My mother would have probably not become Muslim yet, and that's what I did. Until this day, she reminds me, remember that time I cooked for you? And you said that your religion said you can't eat with me. So was the safe opinion really the better option? And that's why I appreciate what Sheikh Osama is saying. The need to have a relationship with the teacher, but that can also be dangerous if it's abused.
That's right.
We don't need to be asking teachers about my iPad and playing, Medal of Honor 3 or whatever. That ain't what you ask your Sheikh. Sheikh Shah Wali al-Dahlawi rahimahullah, he said that the Sahaba, 13 questions of the Sahabi are only recorded in the Quran. 13. Because the Prophet empowered them. They weren't going, oh, Messenger of Allah, is it okay if, I grow some plants back in my house? You can ask him. And look at the questions that they asked the Prophet in the Quran. They ask you about orphans. They cared about social justice. They cared about orphans. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْيَتَامَى. They ask about menstruation. That means women. Who was asking about that? It was women. Right? So the women were able to ask him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They ask him about nikah, because marriage is a fundamental principle to keep a society, inshallah, safe and chaste, right, and healthy. They asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the area of Mecca, something extremely sacred. But you don't find them asking the Prophet about little things, man. Little things. They ask him, when is the hour? What's ihsan? How do I have khushu'? Not, hey, there's this new string for camels, and it was made in China, and they're non-Muslims, and I don't know, if I can use it. They didn't ask him those kind of things because they were empowered. They were empowered to think for themselves. My son, when he sleeps at night, and he says, Dad, Dad. One brother told me, your son shouldn't call you dad. He should call you father. I said, is your name Carlton, man? What's wrong with you, man? I said to him, when my son calls me dad, it's like music to my heart.
That's right.
I don't want him calling me imam. I'm going to call me sheikh. I'm going to call me dad. Because dad is a real one. Father's like, father, comma. But dad is like, yo, what up, yo? You know what I mean? Dad, I can't sleep. Why? Man, there's a monster in my closet. So what do? Turn on all the lights. Open up the closet. And, oh, that's my teddy bear. And grab your teddy bear, man. You come back 30 minutes later. Why? Because knowledge is the way to deal with uncertainty.
Pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us all, reward you greatly for coming. Jazakumullah khair. If you could end this in prayer, please. I mean, you were saying, man, stuff was,
In the name of God, the most gracious and most merciful, we beseech him to send his peace and blessings upon our master, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We ask him by the greatness of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to illuminate our hearts with faith. We ask Allah to protect us from the punishment of doubt and bless us with the gift of certainty. We ask him to unite us with the Prophet.